Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I got an invitation to come to Bengaluru, and I could not resist because I thought it'll give me an opportunity to be with some of the most exciting and innovative people in the country. Bengaluru has always been the hub of creativity, and I look forward to a very exciting conversation here with all of you. This is Invoke Education, and the way it's written, InvokED, version 3. And the version 2 comprised of Sarkar, Samaj, and Bazaar. And when I got the paper and I was looking at InvokED version 3, I was looking at 3 words there: to design, to orchestrate, and to evangelate. So these are the 3 points which I presume you have been discussing. I mean, needless to say, we all keep saying that education is very important, but then all of us who are in this hall, we're all creatures of education. We're all creatures of where we went, the kind of teachers we had, and the kind of engagement with the world that opportunity has given us. And I always say that if there's one thing which any person who wants to do well in life, that is to get himself educated, and it is for us to give him an opportunity to be educated in a manner. I guess we all have been privileged and have had that opportunity. So this opportunity needs to be scaled, and this opportunity also needs to be given to everyone. You know, I mean, if you look at the Indian education system, we've always had, I mean, education has always been a way of life. And initially we went to Gurukuls, and I remember a small story which I'm going to recall. So this is a story in the book written by Bhaiji. And he writes that there's this fellow who's at a Gurukul with his teacher and spends many years, and his education comes to an end. And teacher tells him that, look, it's time for you to go. And the teacher's wife is very disappointed because she's very fond of the student. And she keeps delaying his departure. And soon it's going to be night, and she also realizes that she cannot keep him back. So she gives him a little food and a lantern, and with heavy heart, the boy starts walking away. After he has walked about 100, 200 meters, his teacher calls him back, and he takes the lantern back from him. And he says that now that I have educated you, now you have to navigate yourself with the inner light which education gives you. So this is the importance education has always had. But I guess if you look at the Gurukuls, they've had their own advantages, but there was the issue of inclusion and access as we understand it today. We spoke different languages, the education was done in a different language. Some of the issues we are still grappling with even today in 21st century India. What language should we use for education? And I'll come back to you a little later. The second part is, I am from Bihar, so somebody said that you must cite an example from Nalanda. And we often say that we've had a great tradition of having a university. Nalanda was set up sometimes in the 400 AD, and it continued till 1193. At 1193, it was a great bustling university. It had about 10,000 students, 1,000 odd professors, a library which was 3-story high. And yet, what happened? If you read a book on Ashoka written by Charles Allen, he gives a very bright description, or a very poignant description of what happened to Nalanda in that book. Bakhtiyaruddin Khilji, along with his 90 horsemen, he was in Varanasi. And somebody had told him that about 100 miles from here there exists a university. So he gallops all the way to Nalanda, and he arrives at that university. And 90 horsemen, imagine, somebody who is a foreigner, not even belonging to this part of the world, has no logistical back support. If you're fighting a war or a battle that require a logistical back support. So he did not have that also. And yet, he manages to burn down the entire university, put all the monks to sword, and it is said that the library burned for more than a week. What happened? How can a great university be put to end in a manner it did? I'm not going to answer this question. You may like to find an answer for it. And I have been thinking about it, and all kinds of answers come to my mind. But the larger question I'm leaving with you is, Nalanda was destroyed in 1193, and the next university we gave ourselves was in 1856, when the Britishers were there. What happened in that 600 years in between? Why did we not create a university for ourselves when we had such a great tradition for running a university, and it was part of our institutional memory in the country? Again, this is a question which begs, I think, explanation. While Nalanda was being destroyed in 1193, the Britishers set up Oxford in 1096. And since then, Oxford University has continuously thrived, and it has remained a very important, or perhaps one of the best university in the world. Maybe the English did something for the last 900 odd years to be able to sustain an institution at that level. Do we have the capacity to sustain an institution for 100 years? Look at our university system in the country. Often we say, oh my God, this was such a great university. What has happened to it now? Why has the university failed us? Why have the university, or maybe that's a question which is not a correct question. Maybe the universities have become better, but then we are caught up in some kind of a nostalgia, and we are always saying that the past was better. So we need to be good institution builders. This is the point I am leaving, and we'll again come back to this question. The third point, again, I would want to say it out of my own experience, that do you imbibe education, do you do science which is culture neutral? Or what you learn to a very large extent depends on the kind of a culture you have. So if you want to learn differently, you need to introspect and look at your culture, and you ask yourself, does that allow me to do that? Let me give you an example. We often do Western science, and we often say that we in India, we don't get Nobel Prizes in physics. I've been a student of physics, so I'm going to give an example from physics. I was a grad student in the US, and I came across a brief study which was written by two Indian physicists. One is E.C.G. Sudarshan, who used to be at University of Texas at Austin, and the other gentleman used to be Professor Mahajan at University of Maryland. They wrote a book, they wrote a 25 pages odd paper explaining as to what is the trajectory of an Indian grad student who wants to become a physicist in the US. And the moral of the story is pretty interesting, which I would want to share with you. When you are a grad student, an Indian is at the top of the class. He is perhaps the best, because you are following a fixed curriculum. A teacher comes and teaches you, and at the end of the chapter, there are questions to be answered, again, which is standard for you. So we are very good when we are told what to do. Then you become a PhD student. You come down a notch lower, but you still do well because you still have a guide to guide you. But the real problem begins when you become a postdoc. You are in uncharted water because you have to start thinking for yourself and start finding your own way in the large sea of knowledge. And then we start losing our bearing bit by bit, and we don't get the Nobel Prize. We remain a good physicist, but not the top. The larger question is, what do you do when you're told not what to do? Do you still know what to do when you're told not what to do? And is our education system telling us what to do? I don't know. Maybe it is also part of our culture. that we feel very comfortable when somebody else is telling us what to do. And science has not developed in the manner it has. If you look at the Renaissance in Italy and in Western Europe in the late 16th century, it all started with a new way of inquiry, a new way of looking at nature, a new way of finding solutions, and also being an iconoclast, not going by the kind of tradition you had in the past. This is the essence of education. I think our education system should be able to do this for us. And if it is not doing, then all of us need to collectively come together and ask ourselves that, okay, this is my culture. What kind of knowledge I imbibe? Can I teach it in the manner I do? In 1947, we got independent, and 50 we gave us also an Indian Constitution. In 1950 Indian Constitution, education was part of state list. And it had to wait until 1976 for the 42nd Amendment when education was shifted to concurrent list. So the union and the state both have a say in what happens in education. But by the time 1976, a lot of legacy issues had already occurred with us. And that is the way the education system had evolved. So if you look at the Indian schooling system, we run one of the most complex schooling education system in the world. We run 14.66 lakh schools, to which go about 250 million students, and they are taught by 97 lakh teachers. And out of this 14.66 lakhs, government and government-aided schools are 10.5 lakhs. And they're all in 36 states and UTs. And out of this 14.66 lakhs, Government of India runs just about 2,000 schools, about 1,250 Kendriya Vidyalayas and 661 Navodaya Vidyalayas. The rest are all managed by the states, or they are a part of the private sector. Now, it sounds quite nice, but then when you look at the schooling structure, there are causes for concern. And the first concern is, we send 250 million children to 14.66 lakh schools. Average strength of a school is 172. When I only talk of government and government-aided schools, this number comes down to 132. And when I look at the government and government-aided schools, which have average number of students is 132 only, out of that, 37% of schools are the ones which have less than 50 enrollment. I, as a secretary school education, I often worry that how do you bring in economy of scale in a school which has only 50-odd children? So what we did, we were looking at access. And we created access. We made a lot of schools. Number of schools have ballooned up. We sent 250 million children to 14.66 lakh schools. China sends 29 crore children to 5 lakh schools. So an average school in China has 554 students. The US has 550 students. Israel has 469. We have 172. Our schools have become small. They need economy of scale. What do I do about it is a cause of concern. The second point I want to leave before you is also the structure of the schooling system. And I mentioned earlier that school was part of first state and then concurrent post-1976. We run 10 types of schools. And what do I mean by running 10 types of schools? We run schools which are 1 to 5, 1 to 8, 1 to 10, 1 to 12, 6 to 12, 8 to 12, only 9 and 10, only 11 and 12. So there are 10 types of schools we are running. And when I look at the number of students who are studying, on an average, a child who is doing from class 1 to 12, he needs to have more than one admission. So only 5.57% children who are part of Indian schooling system, they go to a school where they study with one admission. That you go to class 1 and you study till class 12 there. The rest are all having to change schools. And when you're changing schools, I find that 76% of students are having to go 3 admissions in their class 1 to 12 journey. And when you have 3 admissions, then you drop out somewhere. And where do I see children dropping out? I see children dropping out when the geography of the school is changing. So when you're going, I get maximum dropout from 5 to 6. I get dropout from 8 to 9. And then I get dropouts from 10 to 11. So in this process, my retention rate, if I have 100 students in class 1, I have only 55 students in class 12th. 45 are falling out on the way in the journey from class 1 to 12. This again has to be arrested. But the larger question which I'm leaving behind is, and we are worrying about the fact is that we need a cylindrical system. If I have 100 students in class 1, then I also need to have 100 students in class 12 if I am going to have a GR of 100 for secondary education. But my system is like a pyramid. I don't have that many number of student seats in class 11th and 12th. And if you look at that system, so the obvious answer is that we need to invest more in secondary education. We need to create more schools at the level of 9, 10th, 11th, 12th. You might say that I'm only narrating some of the sad things, but then these are some of the issues we need to talk about. I will come back to a little on assessment. India has 62 school boards. And there are 8 states which are having more than 2 school boards. So if you take a state like West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, they have one board for class 10 and they have another board for class 12th. And if you see the results which are coming out of 10th and 12th, often I don't see a correlation because both these boards are not working in tandem with each other. We've been advising the states that have one board. But then even if you have one board and if you have more than 35, 40 school boards, how do you create a platform of equivalence all around? And when we look at results every year of NEET, which comes out for an all-India examination, I find that students coming from different boards are actually accessing these examinations differently. So again, it's a question we need to sit down, look at the details. Most of you, if you are in Bangalore, then you might like to see how the Karnataka State School Board is faring in all the all India examinations like JEE, JEE Advanced, maybe CIVET or NEET. I find that the CBSE schools are doing the best, but the rest of the state school boards are accessing all these things differently. One more point I would want to say before I move on to other things is that how do you solve the demand and supply issues? We often say that our schooling system is very stressful, and the stress in the schooling system has led to the kind of tuitions which we see all around. You know, one day I was driving in Patna and I saw a huge billboard. And the billboard said that we need to convert Patna into Kota. And I was wondering that where is this coming from, that of all the things we need to convert Patna, we have to convert it into a Kota. But then what is the mantra behind the success of Kota? It is the kind of demand and supply which we have. We must manage it. You know, we have great institutions, we have good institutions, but the middle space is vacant. The middle space is vacant and the middle space needs to be populated. So I went to a college in Delhi University. When I joined in the year 1982, 83, admitted 300 students every year. Even today, it does 300. And look at the number of students which have increased. So a few years back, I met a father on after the CBSE results were announced, and he was absolutely down in the dumps. So I said, what happened? He says, oh, my daughter has got only 96% marks. So I said, you should be happy. 96% marks is good. He says, no, with these marks, she will not get admission in any of the colleges in the North Delhi University campus. And that's true. When the political science first cutoff came, it was 100%. So look at the kind of supply we have and the kind of demand which is there. And until we match this demand and supply issue, we'll keep talking about reducing stress in our education system, but it will not be of much help because our parents are seeing our children and they want something for them, and they feel that unless a child gets into a kind of a rat race, goes to a dummy school, does nothing but jive for the last 4 or 5 years of his schooling years, he is not going to do well. This will have to be worked out, and I think easier said than done. It's a very complex issue. I'm happy to say that the National Education Policy 2020, which is here, it's one of the most, not because I am Secretary of School Education, so I'm saying it, but I can say it with fair amount of surety that is one of the best policy documents we have read. And Mrs. Anita Karwal, my predecessor, is here, and she has been instrumental in drafting that policy. It's a great document. But our challenge always lies in implementation, and implementation we must do well. It talks about foundational literacy and numeracy. It talks about the fact that children learn best in their mother tongue. And so when you go to a school and you need to be taught in your mother tongue, issues of language comes into the picture, as I was mentioning earlier. I look at the data for the last 4 or 5 years, and I find that children who are studying in state languages is going down, and a large number of states across the country, they are converting their schools into English medium schools. This morning I had visited 2 schools on the outskirts of Bengaluru, and they told me with great pride that these are English medium schools. One of the teachers said that, sir, you can talk to our children in English. And when you walk into a class, everyone would stand up and say, good morning, good morning. Then in a sing-song manner, they will say, good morning, sir. We talk about Indian knowledge systems, and I saw somebody today in one of the schools, I saw Humpty Dumpty being shown as a animation to our children. I think some of our thought processes need to change, and we need to start thinking about as to how the curriculum should look. And I'm happy to say once again, that we have come out with a national curriculum framework for school education. Shankarji is here, he's been part of it. Madam Karwal also has been part of it. And it's again, so the NCERT is in the process of constructing these new textbooks from class 1 to 12. And I do hope that these books, once they come into the hands of the children, would tell them that will be like a physical manifestation of the National Education Policy 2020. Similarly, the assessment patterns also need to change, and I often say that what you learn and how you learn to a very large extent is dependent on the manner you are assessed. So the assessment processes also must change, and if you want experiential knowledge to gain a foothold in our schools, we must start looking at the assessment process and ask questions in that manner. But is it possible with the kind of numbers we have in our schools? You see, nowadays, everyone goes for MCQ. So you ask a student who gets 99% marks to write an essay of 2 pages in a language of his choice, he starts faltering. So power of expression, which comes through knowing your language well, also deserves consideration and also deserves to be imagined in a manner in which children start learning in their language. The maddening aspect of working in the education sector is that a large number of social determinants which actually determine how you learn, they are outside the department. You don't have much control over it. And I'll give you another example from something which I read and it attracted my attention. So David Kremer, who won the Nobel Prize in 2019, along with Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee, he was in Kenya in early 90s. He and his girlfriend, who later went on to become his wife. So they were studying schooling system in Kenya, and they were very worried that learning outcomes are very poor. And so they decided to do a random control trial. And this is the first time RCT was done in a social sector. Earlier it was done in pharmaceutical sector. So they divided the school into two parts, and they did a RCT, assuming that one set of schools has the textbooks and the other schools do not have. They found that the results were negative. There was nothing to confirm that if you have books, your learning outcomes are going to become better. Then they thought that the PTR needs to improve. Again, they found a negative. They found a zero correlation. Then they said, okay, let's do it this way, to reduce the number of students in a class. Again, nothing happened. Until somebody came and told them that, look, a large number of children in these areas, they have worms in their stomach. So let's do a deworming. And they divided the school into two parts. One school was dewormed and the other one was not, and they found a 25% increase in learning outcomes. So this is the beginning of the deworming exercise in the whole world. So sometimes having a good breakfast or a good lunch perhaps is the best teacher. And teacher would definitely become relevant once you are able to concentrate, you do not have worms in your stomach, and you do not have a lot of stress at home. So social determinants also need to be worked at, but then that makes it that much more complex. But the basic idea is that we need to look at all these things while we are devising a schooling system. A senior colleague of mine, once he narrated a story to me, that he and his elder brother, they used to go to a school, and his elder brother used to stammer. So the principal of the school, he noticed that the elder brother stammers. So one day he called him and said that, look, I see that you are stammering and it is affecting your confidence. So I'm willing to work at you. Can you come to me on every Sunday? So every Sunday, he would take out his bicycle and go to the school, and the principal would spend about 2 hours with him every. And in due course of time, he lost stammering. This is, I think, what a teacher should do. A teacher who's spending 240 days a year with a child every day in a class, he should know his children better than perhaps anyone else. And teachers are the linchpin, and I don't think we can make any substitute on this. We need to empower our teachers. We need to invest more on them. And this is the time when every state comes to us at the Department of School Education, and we do the project approval board for Samagra Shiksha. And I look at the PAB approval every year, and last 2 years we've been seeing, not last 2 years, there's been a pattern. Out of the total amount of money which is going to a state, teachers' education is getting about 2 to 3%. So if you get just 2 to 3% and you invest only that much in the teacher's education, how are you going to get good teachers? So we need to invest more, and often how much you invest to a very large extent also conveys the point that to what extent you hold it important. And from the days of Kothari Commission, we've been saying that we should be spending 6% of our GDP, 6% of public expenditure. Public expenditure in education should be 6% of GDP. I think as of now, I was looking at the figure, the higher education department maintains it is 4.64. So we still have a long way to go. But I'm saying that in 68 also we said 6%. In 86 also we said 6%. In 2020 also we have said 6%. We have not reached 6%. We need to reach 6%. And the state and everyone else should invest more on education, and then only we'll be able to do things. These are some of the hard-hitting areas where we need to work. And also, I would often say that, we talk in the larger perspective, but the shorter and the more detailed perspectives sometimes are more important. If we say that we need empowered teachers, have we created an incentive system for the teachers to become empowered or to become trained? What does he or she gain if he hones his skills? I don't think so. The service rules of teachers' promotion and the recruitment in various states are offering them some kind of an incentive. So when you are actually working, we need to look at the details, and often God is in the details, and these details will have to be looked into. This is the daily bread and butter of us, which we are doing, but we are all very excited, we are all very hopeful that this is the best time to do things. Our median age is 28.6, 29 years of age. We are 29. The world's median age is 31. So as of now, we are younger than the world. US is 38, China is 42, Japan is 49. We have a window of next 10 years ahead of us. And in this window of 10 years ahead of us, we need to invest more in education, get our act together, ensure that every child is in the school and he finds a way to learn things in a de-stressed manner, in a joyful manner, everything which the National Education Policy 2020 says. Easier said than done, but if we don't do it, and if we miss the next 10 years of window, then you can imagine what may happen to us. And the last thing I would say before I would sum up is that we may have the luxury of many things in life, but we do not have the luxury of time. I think we need to do things together in the next 10 years, and if we do it, I think Vikasit Bharat at the end of 2047 will become an easy reality. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.